the next project that I'm working on is involves people's intrinsic preferences for information. So according to standard economic theory, people should always prefer more information to less. There's nothing bad about information. If you think that information is coming from an untrustworthy source, just ignore it. Don't use that information. And at work, at best, you could use that information to improve the quality of your decisions, right? But so standard economic theory says that the value of information is equal to its ability to improve your decisions. So information that doesn't improve your decisions, a person should never pay for because it's essentially worthless. Now, this doesn't really accord with our intuitions because we think, just casual observation suggests that people seek out information about happy things in their future and avoid information about depressing or anxiety-provoking things in their future, right? So people will seek out information about their hobbies, like sports or going on vacations. People might avoid information about things like their cancer test or perhaps their financial woes. So I worked on a project to model this kind of intrinsic preference for information, and then we conducted an experiment with a co-author to see whether it's true, whether people do have these intrinsic preferences for information, with the basic hypothesis being the more happy the information, controlling for its usefulness, the more the people want the information. The more scary or the more anxiety-provoking the information, the more, again, controlling for its usefulness, the more they want to avoid that information. So what we do is we run an experiment. Students come into the lab, and there's two envelopes. They sit down, and there's two envelopes in front of them. Each envelope, subjects are told, you own this envelope, this belongs to you. You'll walk out of the experiment with these envelopes and the contents inside the envelope. And there's a 10% chance that each envelope may contain money. The first envelope, if it has money, has $10. The second envelope, if it contains money, contains $100. Okay. And so then we ask people we tell them there's a catch. You don't know whether these envelopes will have money, and you'll find out at the end of the experiment in 30 minutes. But you could pay a little bit of money, you could pay 50 cents to open up the envelope now. Would you like to pay money to open the envelope now? Right? And so what we find, now here the information is completely useless. You can't use the information to improve any decision whatsoever. And what we find is that people are much more likely to open up the big envelope, the one with the $100 bill, than the small envelope. Right? And so the idea here is the happier the information, the higher the intrinsic information demand. And then we thought, well, what's the effect in reverse? What happens when we're dealing with information about depressing or anxiety-provoking future experiences? And so what we did is we did a very similar experiment. We said, you're going to get tested for herpes simplex virus 1 and herpes simplex virus 2. So these are sexually transmitted diseases. And this is all for real stakes. So we actually have a phlebotomist there in the lab. They're going to draw the person's blood. Okay? And then what we say is, we're going to test you for these diseases. And you could pay money not to get tested. We're going to draw the blood no matter what. But you could pay money so that we dump the blood out, to not know whether you have a sexually transmitted disease. And what we find, well, I should go back for a second. So herpes simplex virus 1 is typically associated with cold sores, and herpes simplex virus 2 is typically associated with genital herpes. And most people find the latter to be the more scary version of the disease. And what we find is that for those who don't want the information, they're more willing to pay to avoid herpes simplex virus 2. So basically, the more scary the disease, the greater the avoidance. This isn't universally true for everybody, but we basically find that there's two types of people: those who want information and sort of conform to the standard economic theory, and then those who want to avoid information. And for those who want to avoid information, the more scary, the more anxiety-provoking the information, the more they avoid it. So that's the second research agenda, people's intrinsic preferences for information.